What's up, boys? Well, I figured I'd sit here and talk to you guys about the old story of the Texas Snowstorm. Now, this is the first time it's ever happened in my whole lifetime, and after going through it for about a week, I hope it's the last. And I'd like to talk to you all about pretty much what happened and my experiences with it. Now, for those of you guys that have been living under a rock, you don't notice or don't know what's going on, last week, this entire place here in my backyard was covered in snow. Now, usually it's just covered in leaves and other random bullshit, but that one week, for the first time in really my entire life, there was more snow than I had ever seen before. And the really ironic thing about this was that about a month ago, I remember I posted a picture. I was like, oh, it's so nice to see the snow. There was snow coming down. It was the middle of the day. I went outside and there were parents taking pictures of their children playing out in the street. Everybody was happy. Everybody was having a good time. It was a winter wonderland. Well, let me tell you something. This past week was more like a nuclear winter. It was a really bad fucking time. People didn't have power. People didn't have heat. People didn't have running water. They couldn't leave their house because God knows, Texas is not necessarily prepared for this. We don't have the tractors that move the snow off of the road. We don't have the salted roads. We don't have the insulated houses. There are many people in Texas that don't even really have heat because it only gets cold for maybe a month or so out of the year. Maybe they've got a space heater, but it wouldn't really fucking matter because the entire heat system went completely down, or power system went completely down. So for me personally, this all started on Valentine's Day. It's kind of ironic. And basically, what ended up happening is I woke up that morning and, I heard like, oh, it's going to be icy outside. It's going to be really cold. Yeah, whatever. And I had a place to go. I had a show that I was going to do. So I got up and I checked my messages and they said, don't go over there. It's too dangerous. And I was like, that's fine. And I walked outside and I looked outside and there was already like 2 or 3 inches or 4 inches of snow over the roads. And for comparison, Texans are not used to this, okay? Like, I know I've got a lot of, viewers from Norway, and you guys are thinking, oh, dude, that's nothing, man. Like, that's, you go out in a short sleeve shirt. Well, listen, man, it gets up to 115 fucking degrees here. So that's the bullshit we got to deal with. You guys might have to deal with the snow, but we have to deal with the heat, and we're not used to dealing with both. And we had a really, really bad time, and everyone from the top to the bottom did. It was kind of ironic. I have a lot of friends of mine that are streamers. Sorry, I'm holding the camera, so it might fall down a little bit. A lot of my friends who are streamers, they live in these really expensive houses, and we had power for the majority of the time. Not obviously all of the time, but the majority of the time. And here they are sitting in these $1 million houses with no power, living like cavemen. And I'm sitting in my house with admittedly no heat and no running water, but I've got power, which means I've got the internet, feeling like a fucking king. And I remember thinking and looking at Twitter very regularly and thinking to myself how fucking lucky I am that we have power, and how lucky I am compared to a lot of the other people out there. There are some people that just got completely fucked in the ass by this, and it's a disappointing situation. I feel bad for them, I do. And here I am sitting here with no heat and no water, and we only have intermittent power. But compared to those people, I really did think I was lucky. I came out of this ahead. And we did have a couple of space heaters that were back in the day. I've told this story a number of times, or parts of it. I grew up quite poor, and we couldn't really afford heat in my house. So this is not necessarily my first rodeo. Now, obviously, this is a big rodeo, bigger than I've ever dealt with before. But I've dealt with things that are very similar to this before. I'm very used to, using different types of blankets to insulate myself while I'm asleep, seeing little ice crystals on my water cup whenever I wake up because it's been so cold overnight, and all that kind of stuff. And usually we had space heaters, but I would, of course, give them to my mother, and I would just sleep in the freezing cold, and I kind of liked it in a way. I always felt like I was role-playing as like Bear Grylls or Les Strauss, trying to survive on the fucking slopes of Mount Everest or something. And I'll be honest, sometimes that's the way it felt too. And So I'm used to this. I was just, in a way, kind of like freezing my ass off in my house with nothing working. It was almost a little bit nostalgic, but it still sucked because it sucked back then too. So, Sunday comes around and we still have running water. Everything's pretty much working except for, being able to drive. And that was the case for quite a while. Then, after time went on, things progressively got worse. And by Monday or so, our pipes had frozen. Even though we had been running the water to prevent that from happening, the pipes started freezing. So then running water went away. And it's basically like every day or so, we went back about 200 years of technological evolution. And that's pretty much what happened then. And lost the water. And you think, like, I made a joke about this on my Twitter. I was like, this doesn't affect me. I don't use water. Who cares? It turns out that I do. If I ever want to take a shit, turns out the toilets use water. So what did I have to do? Because obviously the toilets wouldn't work. Well, I did the only reasonable thing that a person would do. I went over to these right here, and I broke off every single icicle. I put them in a bucket, and I put the bucket right next to the space heater, and I melted down icicles in order to use them for toilet water so I could flush the toilet. And it's really funny story to tell. I like telling this story, but I certainly didn't like having the experience of it. That was not as fun. And my mom, how like, it's like, imagine I'm going into a Mythic Plus town. Oh, it's a little possum. He's walking right over the fence there. Look at that. Wow. I'll have to go feed him. So anyway, it's like, we go into a mythic dungeon. Let's imagine this is a mythic dungeon, okay? A little snowstorm. Well, we had a couple of affixes. You know what one of the affixes was? My mom's blood pressure medicine. Wow, how fun. So, my mom, I've been in an ongoing debate with my mom's doctor's office. This has been like 3 or 4 phone calls now about her getting her blood pressure medicine without actually having to come in the midst of a COVID pandemic and a flare-up at that inside of Texas. And I was trying to convince them that, hey, maybe it's not the best idea for my 70-year-old mother who has a million problems, which is, by the way, why you're giving her the medicine, to come in during COVID. And it took 3 phone calls or 4 phone calls, but eventually we did get a telemedicine phone call for her. But that didn't happen until after the snowstorm, maybe 5 or 6, 3 or 4 days ago at this point. We finally got her a phone call and an appointment. So everything's taken care of now. But at that point, the day that she ran out of medicine, she straight up ran out of her blood pressure medicine. Guess what fucking day that was? Monday. One day after the snowstorm started. One day after everything was completely shut down. And my stress levels were at the fucking moon. Like, I was so worried, man. I say it with a smile, but I didn't experience it with one. I was not happy at all. I was really upset. So that ended up happening, and I was just fucking worried every day, checking on her constantly, making sure she didn't, overexert herself or do anything. It was a very, very unpleasant experience for me. It was really stressful. So that ended up happening, and then on top of that, we kind of had power outages, and my mom, she's a trooper, okay? Like, she's enjoying herself, she's happy. Oh, this is okay, everything's fine. She actually took it pretty well. As I said, she was there with me whenever all the stuff was turned off whenever we were younger, so this is not necessarily an unknown quantity for her. So anyway, that happened. Tuesday rolls around, and I walk over, it's actually Monday still, I walk over at night to the convenience store, and there is one convenience store open. I go to that convenience store after walking for, unironically a mile in the snow, just to buy a fountain drink, really. And by the way, I can't buy those even now because there's a boil warning for our water, because apparently during this event, I don't know, like an animal got in our water supply and died in it, and so they don't want anybody drinking the water until it gets boiled. So just a little bit of a fun residual for us. Anyway, so I go to the convenience store, and there's one open. And of course, it's COVID at the same time. We've got ourselves a double whammy here. And anyway, we go to the convenience store. I look outside, and there's about a line that is longer than the entire store. And it's almost longer. It's probably, like, I would say, like 30 or 40 feet long, of people waiting to get inside of the store, because they can only let so many people in at a time, and it would just be unsafe to let a bunch of people in as well. So I sat out there waiting for about an hour or so, whenever it's like, 0 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't really know. I think it's like -15 or something like that Celsius. But yeah, it was really, really cold. And I just had such a terrible experience doing that. But I did get my drink, and so everything was okay. And, next day goes by, and it's pretty much just at a standstill. It was still extremely cold. Our water was still cut off. We weren't able to really go anywhere. And finally, I was able to get the car out of the driveway, and there had been a few other people driving around, so some of the roads were a little bit padded down. And I had never driven on ice before, and it turns out that you can spin out on ice. And I was driving and seemed completely fucking fine, and it was the craziest feeling ever, man. Like, my car, I was like driving, and that bitch just spun around. Like, I had no control. I completely lost control of my car. I've never experienced anything like it before. And after that, I drove home quite quickly, and I stayed there. Freaked the fucking shit out of me. I'll be honest. I was really upset about it. But it turns out I was safe. I didn't hit anybody or anything. And so it was really, honestly, the most painless lesson I could have learned. And I always try to make the best out of things and try to take the positive out of them. But holy shit, that was really scary. But at least now I know to take it a little bit more seriously now. I drove to Wendy's at that exact same time. I was driving back from Wendy's. And turns out they closed at 8, and I got there. There's obviously a line that went out into like the main street that it was off of. There was like a line of probably, I don't know, 50 people waiting at the drive-thru, and I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna get my nuggets. So I waited there in the drive-thru for about 30 or 40 minutes, and I was about 2 cars from the window where they take your order. And I saw 2 guys drive in front of me, and then the first guy in front of me pulled away. The second guy in front of me pulled away. I'm like, what's going on here? And I'm like, hey, what's up? Or something like that. And they're like, we're closed. And I think that right there was probably the lowest point of the whole week. Waiting at Wendy's for that long, and then finding out that they were just going to be closed, and I wasn't going to get my nuggets or anything. Really fucking sucked. But anyway. Next day goes by, and I still haven't gotten anything. And at this point now, there's the boil warning, so I'm not able to get a fountain drink at the store anymore, even if I do walk through a mile of snow. And that really sucked. We still had power most of the time. Our heaters like stopped working, so we had heat for probably, like, I'd say 5% of the time. But it's honestly. It was so much better than 0. Let me just say that. And I think to myself, man, I'm like, again, I thought we got so lucky. We got so lucky that it wasn't worse. I had my friend, a guy I know, Tyler Trainwrecks, man. They always call this guy an ape. And honestly, like, he went back to his fucking roots. Like, he went back probably 2,000 years of technology. He was actually a fucking Neanderthal for the first week or so of this thing, man. Like, his apartment didn't have power. It didn't have heat. It didn't have anything. He had no running water. He couldn't take a shower. Couldn't do anything. And obviously couldn't get on the internet. The only thing he could do was get on his phone that was dying, by the way, and complain about it. That really sucked. Oh, and then finally, by the time that they let him go, and he finally got a chance to leave and get picked up by some of our friends, he got put at risk with somebody who turned out to have COVID. So... Not a good time. And anyway, so Friday rolls around, Saturday rolls around, things start to open back up, things start to return to normalcy, and people start to just kind of return back to the usual routine. And it was a really scary experience for a lot of people. I mean, there were some people that died from this. It's really kind of unpleasant. And I've never really been part of a disaster like this before in my life, or I've never really had something like this happen. It's like a national event. And I'll be honest, it did kind of felt bad to see whenever I went on Twitter. Everybody was, like arguing and fighting to decide like whose fault it was and who's to blame, and is it this guy's fault, or this politician's fault, or this person's fault? Ted Cruz, by the way, fuck you. That's some horse shit. You're gonna try and fucking fly away? Oh, it was a non-refundable ticket. Well, why don't you just take some more fucking money from lobbyists and just buy another one later? What a piece of shit. Anyway, I don't know whose fault it is, but it's definitely Ted Cruz didn't do us any fucking favors. Anyway, it did kind of suck. It felt a little bit disgraceful to see a lot of people going out there and trying to put like their own spin and agenda on things. And I guess it's kind of like the same feeling. It's like whenever somebody has like a mass shooting or something like that, and everybody is scrambling to find out what race and religion the shooter is, so they can tailor something or some sort of like narrative to fit their worldview. It's very disgraceful, and it's very off-putting to me. And after being part of something actually like kind of as I said, minimally, but I guess kind of a victim of this too. It did really kind of suck to see that happening in the midst of a lot of people really suffering. It was kind of shitty, but at the end of the day, we got through it. My family got through it. Mom and dad are totally okay, and oh man, as I said, man, I feel pretty damn lucky that we didn't lose our power, because I'll tell you something, if I didn't have the internet for this entire time, I would have gone insane. Well, I have the internet and I already go insane, so I don't really know how much of an improvement or deprovement that would be. But regardless, it was quite an experience. From melting down icicles to trudging through the snow, to not being able to leave the house, to not having any water or power or anything, is definitely a shock, and wouldn't recommend it. I'll say that for sure. Would not recommend it. But I figured I'd tell my story and at least like give my 2 cents of what happened to me and how it went for me. It was pretty stressful. I think the majority of that came from my mom's situation, but otherwise everything was okay. So for those of you guys who are also affected, hope you guys are doing okay too. It's always kind of bittersweet how a situation like this, a disaster or some sort of tragedy, is what it takes to make people come together. But I guess that is a silver lining. Anyway, guys, it's pretty light outside. Seems like it's about time for me to go to bed. So thanks a lot for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.